Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Melinda Martin and I'm the Director of Linda New Art. Tonight in our Artist Speakeasy series, we explore a range of topics throughout the year, and tonight we're talking about NFTs. What is a non-fungible token, or an NFT? We hear you ask. In this very special professional development session, we'll be unpacking this elusive acronym. We will set the record straight, covering definitions, contexts, and how practising artists can take advantage of this new technology and potential marketplace for their art practice. Artists can learn about how to get started in the NFT space and some of the potential ways this platform can be used. We'll hear from an art lawyer and a curator, Alana Kushnir from Guestwork Agency, and Sydney-based 3D artist Serwah Attafuah, who is playing around in this space, and I'm really interested in learning everything she has and all her experiences so far. There'll be lots of opportunities to ask questions, but please be mindful this isn't a session in which Alana's going to provide you with individual legal advice. If you're joining us tonight through Facebook or YouTube and you'd like to make a comment, you need to log into the platform you're watching us on, and we'd love to hear from you. Simply click on the Say Something or write a comment box at the bottom of the live chat area to get started. If you're watching through a TV, congratulations, you're incredibly clever that you've managed to use that, but chatting gets a little bit complicated, so recommend that you chat through your computer, a tablet or a mobile device. Please ask questions or make comments about the conversation in the comments tonight in the platform you're using. Our Events and Community Engagement Coordinator, Linda Studena, will be monitoring them, and some of them will appear up on screen as we go. But before we get started, I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we virtually meet this evening. Tonight, Alana and I are joining you from the lands of the Yalukit clan of the Bunurong people here of the Greater Kulin Nation in Melbourne. And Serwah is beaming in from the lands of the Darung people in Western Sydney in New South Wales, and unfortunately, she's also joining us from the adventures of lockdown. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and while we meet virtually this evening, tonight draws upon the ancient history of this land and reflects the millennia of experiences of First Nations people coming together to celebrate, to tell stories, to make art, to learn and to connect. So I would like to extend a very warm welcome to any First Nations people who are joining us here this evening. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speakers. Alana Kushner. Alana is an arts lawyer and curator. She likes to wear multiple hats. She's the director and founder of Guestwork Agency, an art law and advisory firm, and Guest Club, a membership network for emerging collectors and art lovers. She's also the principal investigator of the Serpentine Gallery's R&D platform, Legal Lab, which explores how the law can better support collaborations across art, science and technology. And she's a sessional lecturer at the University of Melbourne, teaching in subjects on curating, contemporary art and art law. She holds a Master of Art, a Fine Art Curating from Goldsmith in the UK at the University of London, a Bachelor of Arts of Art History and a Bachelor of Laws, both from the University of Melbourne. I'd now like to introduce the artist who is working in this space. Serwah Attafuah is a 3D artist and a musician based in Western Sydney. She creates a surreal cyber wastelands and Afro-futuristic reflections of self with strong ancestral themes. Her work has been commissioned by clients like Nike, GQ, Adobe, Warner Music, Bahad Barbie and YSL Records. She recently exhibited at the NFT exhibition Pieces of Me at Transfer Gallery in LA, and she's participated in Natively, I can't even say it because I'm not, in Natively Digital, a recent online Sotheby's auction showcasing some of the most unique and earliest NFTs to hit the international market. You're also going to present a keynote at Future Art at Vivid Sydney later this year. So welcome Alana and Serwah to this very interesting conversation tonight. Thank you so much for making the time on one of those beautiful Melbourne nights here, which is cold and wet. And so welcome. We know that you're in lockdown, but we hope this will break the boredom of, you being in isolation. So I thought maybe I'll get started with a couple of setting the context. Crypto art and non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, really are redefining how we buy, how we sell, and how we own art and music. So really, how does it work? What is blockchain technology? How do you make one? And what will we be making or selling an NFT do for your artistic practice? We're surrounded by digital files. We live in a digital world, and everything is readily available. Images are downloaded from browsers, in apps, from social media, and they can be transferred using data storage or portable USBs. So how does an NFT differ from a basic digital file? Alana, I thought maybe we should start with the basics. What is an NFT? How does it work? Can you give us a rundown on what minting is, Ethereum, and blockchain? They're all weird and wondrous words for a lot of people. Help us understand.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Melinda, for having me back. It's great to be a part of this conversation. There's lots of new terms that are thrown around in this space. So what I want to do is just give you a little taste and hopefully try not to overwhelm everyone. But look, as Melinda mentioned, if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat, or if you want me to go over a certain term, I'm more than happy to do that as well. I guess this question of what is an NFT, I mean, over the last few months, I guess my understanding of NFTs has certainly evolved. And I think the best way to explain it is as a certificate of authenticity. It's a digital certificate of authenticity. So it relates, I guess, when we come to NFT art, to digital art, but it's not the digital artwork itself. The NFT is linked to the digital artwork, but it acts like a certificate of authenticity. It's registered on the blockchain, which is the underlying technology that supports NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. So that at its most top level, that's how I would describe it. And that's the best way, I think, to start navigating through the space. Ethereum blockchain. So just for those who might not be familiar with blockchain technology, it is, in a way, it's quite a new technology. It's about 10, 11 years old. And it was created by, it's got a kind of a mythical beginning. There's a story, a really interesting story behind how it started, but it was started by an unknown person or persons under this pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto. And this person, no one actually knows who the person is, if they ever existed as a person, if they exist today. And so in 2009, so we're looking at just, post GFC, Satoshi Nakamoto started the first public digital ledger for transactions. And this was known as the blockchain. So it is a ledger, and it was made using Bitcoin currency. And so this ledger is distributed across an entire network of computer systems, which are on the blockchain. And because it's distributed through this entire network, that's why it's sometimes described as being decentralized, because it's not located in the one location like a traditional ledger would be. So that's 2009. If we fast forward to 2014, so 5 years later, this blockchain technology started to be separated out from the currency that it was originally built on, the Bitcoin currency, and other types of potential transactions started to take place or were explored in the blockchain space. And one of the blockchain networks that began at this time in 2014 was Ethereum. And Ethereum is essentially a blockchain that lives on top of the original blockchain. So if you think of the blockchain, there's actually multiple layers, and you can build different applications on these various layers as well. So Ethereum was a kind of a layer built on top of this initial blockchain layer. And the currency that the Ethereum blockchain uses is Ether. And Ethereum's probably most relevant for us to understand when it comes to art NFTs, because most of the mainstream art NFT platforms trade using Ether, the Ethereum-based currency. And so that's Ethereum. I think, Melinda, you also mentioned the term minting. So you might hear someone talk about minting a digital file. So that's the actual process of registering a digital file, essentially on the blockchain, and that's called minting. And through that process, the person who's doing the minting, they verify themselves as the maker of that digital file. And that's where the kind of the authenticity aspect of NFTs comes from, because the principle behind it is that the person who's created the digital file mints it. They're the ones that actually register it on the blockchain. And so that's where that chain of authenticity can then be passed down from the initial minter / artist / creator to the first purchaser, to the second purchaser, and so on and so on. How did I go? Is that too?
You did really well. No, I'm really interested in this because it feels like to me this is just like an updated version of old technology that we've had. And if I think about printmakers, often have a certificate of authenticity that goes with their print work, that indicates that it is an edition number of that work. It is very much just the next stage in development as we engage in this digital world in terms of making art. It's just like the refreshment of that process. So that helps me get my Luddite head around that process.
Good.
Who owns the NFT once the work is sold? What happens in that space?
So, I mean, in a way, the ownership question is quite simple, at least from a technological perspective, because the owner is who the blockchain says. You can register who the owner is on the blockchain. What that means is the owner is the person who holds the digital wallet. So it's another term, the phrase, a wallet that contains the NFT. So if you want to transact in the NFT space, or even if you just want to buy some cryptocurrency, you have to have a digital wallet. So like a real, physical wallet, that's where, in a real physical wallet, that's where you store your cash. So kind of same principle applies to the digital world or the digital space. So you have your digital wallet, that's where you store your cryptocurrency, that's where you store your NFTs, any kind of, blockchain assets. They can sit in your wallet. And so each wallet has a different address, and the address looks like basically a long stream of numbers and letters. And that stream of numbers and letters is unique. So that shows who the owner of the digital wallet is that has the NFT in it. But I think, with this question of ownership, so I guess who owns it is quite simple, because at the end of the day, it comes down to who has the wallet that stores the NFT. But the question is, the real tricky question here is, well, what do you own? And it's still something that has not really actually been settled. So it will depend on who you speak to in the space. But so I think when I was trying to address this question, well, what is an NFT? My position is that what you own as the owner of an NFT is you own that certificate of authenticity, which points to the digital file. But I guess in legal terms, what does that mean? Do you hold the intellectual property? Do you hold the physical or personal property? At least from a legal perspective, it's a very, very grey area.
And I'm wondering, Alana, if you can talk us through some of the images on this PowerPoint, just in terms of like some of the kind of, I guess, the history of the NFT process, in terms of like, we've got CryptoPunks on the screen now. Are they early in the NFT world, or are they later?
Sounds apologies. CryptoPunks are early 2017. They are the first NFT to use the ERC 721 smart contract. Again, another term, smart contract there. It is essentially an automatic transaction that happens on the blockchain. So once the minting process in a way is automated, but then once you buy and sell a work, that's also automated using a smart contract. And there are certain protocols within that smart contract. So it'll say who is the seller, who is the buyer, what the amount is that the pieces or the NFT is being transacted for. And so those standards that are now very common for most NFTs, that would started with these CryptoPunks. So, I mean, CryptoPunks is an example of a series of NFTs that have really achieved, crazy auction numbers recently. But it is because they have this really important historical, that they're really important in the history of NFTs and in the history of art NFTs as well. So that's CryptoPunks. There's another CryptoPunk. And this one is also a very interesting one. Kevin Mccoy, digital artist. This is known as the first NFT, the first art NFT. And it's something that Kevin minted in 2014, but this is pre smart contracts even. This is a very early point in time at which NFT, it's not even, he had to actually re-mint it when he sold it as part of the Sotheby's sale just a month ago, because the way in which he did it, even 5 years ago, 7 years ago, is already obsolete. But I think this is a really interesting example also, 2014. Remember, this is the first time at which people start building new blockchains on top of the original blockchain, including the Ethereum blockchain. But at this point in time, you already have artists experimenting with NFT technology and working with the blockchain as part of their practice. So, it's not like artists have come along later down the track. Yes, there are a lot more artists working in the space today than there were in 2014, but we really see artists at the forefront of experimenting with this type of technology as part of their practice. And Kevin actually came up with this NFT concept as part of a Rhizome 7-on-7 conference. You can actually watch it online, where he's sitting in front of an audience with I think it's a coder, quite a well-known coder, and as part of like a hackathon. And they wanted to create some way of proving the ownership of this digital file. So again, something that has a lot of historical importance now, and I know like people, look at the values that these kind of NFTs are sold for these days and may not understand, but they do have a really important historical role in this development as well. I also put up a few images of CryptoKitties. So CryptoKitties was really the first NFT phenomenon, even before CryptoPunks, about a year before. And like we were talking about earlier, it really sort of it's a good example of where the art world's really interacting with the gaming space. CryptoKitties was essentially a game where you could buy a CryptoKitty and you'd have to like feed it and you own it, and you play with it like a game in essence, but from a technological perspective, it relied on NFTs as part of its ownership and sales process. And I think it was the first one actually to also Ethereum as their base as well. But also CryptoKitties was interesting because it was really the first time in which NFTs started to sort of hit the mainstream, and there sort of started to be a lot more interest from people who had never heard about blockchain technology before. getting into the space as well. So yeah, CryptoKitties, CryptoPunks, and then going back to 2014 as well, with the work that digital artists were doing at that time, are all really important historical markers in this space.
Thank you, Alana, because I think that's really an interesting kind of conversation in terms of like the kind of how rapidly it's kind of changing and evolving. Because, you know, if you think about 2014, it doesn't seem that long ago. And yet, you know, everything that we've lived through in the last little while, it seems like years ago. But it's really interesting how quickly it's changing. So I'm really interested in you as a practitioner in this space. You've been working with digital imagery for several years, and you've only recently entered the NFT marketplace for the first time. Void Walker is your first minted NFT. Can you tell us a little bit about this process and what it was like for you?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. So Void Walker was, my first NFT, sort of like the Mccoy piece that you just explained, Alana. I had to sort of go back and re-mint it once it had been minted the first time. So initially, when I got into NFTs, I was contacted by Lindsay from Foundation, what we know as Foundation now, the NFT platform. For those that don't know, NFTs are usually sold on platforms, online websites, and so forth. So yeah, they contacted me last October and asked if I wanted to sell some digital art online in the format of an NFT, crypto art. And I was like, this sounds awesome. I've been hearing this word for a couple of years now, but I'd never really gotten my head around it, if that makes sense, or never really, as an artist, felt like I wanted to go out of my way to learn what that was. So this gave me a perfect opportunity to really go for it. So yeah, the lineup for that show was really awesome. You can still find some information about it as of now. But in terms of minting this NFT, I provided Foundation with my final image. They sort of said to me, you can provide us with an image of something you've already made if you just like to sell something you've already made, or you could create something totally new and you can have this completely new experience, which I thought was much better. So I made this piece specifically in my mind thinking this is going to be my first NFT. So a lot of that sort of imagery went into it visually. So I provided them with the image, and at the time it was actually sold in a currency called DAI-X, or DAI, which is a cryptocurrency similar to USD. So it's not like Ethereum where it's like 3-4 grand higher than maybe like a grand in USD. And it was basically the same as it is now. It was just a bidding process. I only got one bid, as you can see there, on the original Foundation site, but I was so stoked. I thought that was awesome that, somebody just wanted to buy an artwork that I made just for myself. And you can see there, Kayvon bought it, who's a co-founder of Foundation, and now he's trying to resell it for 25 Ether now. Yeah, so that's kind of the process of Void Walker.
I think what's really interesting for you, because it's sort of like really interesting that there's a bidding aspect in it as well. Like it feels like it's an online auction essentially in a similar kind of platform. What are some of the benefits for you working in this space? And then I guess also what are some of the challenges of putting your work out there in this way and selling your work in this space?
Well, I think it's hard for any artist to really get their head around selling any artwork. Even before I was considering NFTs, I was showing work in galleries and sort of selling prints online and marketplaces and things like this. And it is really hard as an artist who isn't, a Basquiat or something, to sort of sell your artwork. It's like, well, how do I even do this? Who's even going to buy this? Who collects art anymore? In my mind. So yeah, I had never actually really even sold a physical painting in a gallery. So this really seemed like something big for me. And also the fact that I work basically predominantly digitally now, it's really amazing to have a way to sell and show and, you know, trade my artwork in its native organic form. It's really is never going to be the same if I print out one of my pieces and give it to somebody. It's never really going to be the same as seeing it digitally in its natural form. So that's a big benefit for me. Also, yeah, as Alana mentioned before, the smart contract aspect. I don't think that there's any sort of technology, even in the traditional art world, that would sort of track royalties in such a way, or even if I wanted to, you know, make my own custom smart contract and, you know, put in certain rules for the piece, or yeah, just anything like that. Like this can all be done with NFTs and with blockchain technology. So that's really fascinating for me and exciting. And I think we're only really scratching the surface and at the beginning of this. So, but I feel like I'm not smart enough some days because I can't think of really innovative ways to use this technology. I'm thinking, oh, you know, I'm just selling my artwork. This is so basic, but you know, there's someone out there that's coming up with something great, and I'm just really happy to be involved in something new. Yeah.
And I'm interested because one of the things that we, as we were preparing for this conversation tonight, we were talking about the kind of gaming world and that kind of gaming world kind of aesthetic that you can see in CryptoPunks, I guess, pretty like as really early kind of gaming kind of imagery. Do you feel like your work that you're making has a relationship to that gaming world?
I think it definitely could. I think when I started 3D, I sort of saw it as being a game. It's just sort of it's sort of like a video game. Sometimes you're on the computer for 10 hours just playing with little people and little assets. It's almost like a game. And if you make a successful artwork, you win. But you know, there's things like Decentraland, which is this interesting sort of crypto-based Web3 platform. And you know, you can walk around, you can buy things, you can change the way you look, all based on blockchain technology. So there is a very heavy gaming aspect to a lot of these non-fungible tokens and these crypto assets.
And I'm wondering, Serwah, if you can talk us through some of the images. We've got a couple of examples of your work. So on the screen now is Birth of Venus. So maybe if you could talk just a little bit about your practice and the kind of works that you're interested in making as well.
Yeah, so this particular one here, I was commissioned by this rapper slash sort of meme icon called Bad Baby. She was sort of became popular off the Dr. Phil episode or something, and
I just feel like we've entered into this world that could be the beginning of your movie.
It's so crazy. It was like the most random thing that ever happened to me when she asked me to do this. It was like, I think it was like 5 days before her 18th birthday or something, and this was basically right when the Beeple NFT boom was happening, and she just approached me and was like, I want an NFT, can you help me make one? I was like, sure thing. Wow. So we created this for her birthday and we auctioned it off, I believe, but don't quote me on it, that half of the sale was donated to like a trans women's homeless shelter. I'm not 100% sure, but this was something that was talked about. Yeah, so I just sort of took some imagery from her music and from her personality and sort of merged that with iconic art history moments. I've always sort of been really fascinated by Renaissance art and, you know, Rococo art, and just tried to create that in my own digital world and distort it and mess it up and have some fun. So yeah, this was the Bad Baby NFT edition. It's really interesting to see celebrities and musicians get involved in NFTs. I really appreciate and love the way they're so on board with it so far. This one here, I did this last year, right when sort of coronavirus shut us all inside. This was sort of a feeling of being underwater and drowning, but it's still kind of nice down there. This has not been minted as an NFT yet, but I'm thinking about doing that this month or next month. But yeah, this is all like 3D artwork, all done digitally. There's no illustration involved. This is, this one here, this was, I guess, my first NFT back in the space, back on my own. That makes sense. So from me minting October 2020, that Void Walker piece, several months have gone by, and I don't think Foundation was operating at all. They sort of went away after that first version. I think they were sort of building the site back up, and then they relaunched in February. And I had dropped that previous piece, Consensual Hallucinations 2021, in early March. And it was really, I've sort of never felt any feeling like this. It sold for 10 Ether, which at the time was $24,000 Australian. And just coming from someone who had never sold a piece of artwork in a gallery, or was still sort of selling prints of my artwork for $30-40, this was really it gave me a headache in a good way.
Incredibly exciting too, to get that kind of support in that world. And I think it's like your marketplace is really sounding like a really global place. Like you're getting commissioned by people from the other side of the world. It's not like your world is small or limited to where you might live or practice, which I think is really interesting. You recently exhibited in an online NFT exhibition called Pieces of Me at Transfer Gallery. What happened? Like, what do you see? Like, is it a traditional gallery space that you might walk into? What is that you would see on a wall, or is it a completely virtual kind of experience? I'm really interested in what that's been like and what kind of contractual obligations you've had in that kind of gallery relationship as well.
Yeah, well, it was very interesting to be involved with a gallery, but also be making NFTs at the same time. And they were quite early with it as well. I sort of got approached quite early in the year about it, and it was a fascinating opportunity. It was a virtual exhibition, so not physical as of yet, but this will happen, I'm sure. And yeah, the sort of process and backbone of the show was sort of to do an NFT show that felt different. NFTs were sort of very male dominated and sort of quite whitewashed in the early part of the year, with went down with a lot of the larger sales. That sort of overshadowed a whole bunch of great digital art that had been happening for years and years and years and years. A lot of the people that were involved in the show, I had sort of known or admired their work for years. Just being in the net art space or digital art space, we've all sort of been trying to sell our digital artwork or give a platform to it, but we haven't had the opportunity or the platform to do so now. We've been doing it, but not in the way that we see it now. So yeah, Pieces of Me was sort of about that, and it was awesome. Alana actually went to the show, I believe.
Yeah, that's actually where I first heard or saw your work. And I remember when Kalani Nicole is the founder of Transfer Gallery, and she built this exhibition. And she's like, oh yeah, and Serwah, she's from West Sydney, and I was just like, what? Because also, for me, a lot of the work that I do in this space, everybody that I'm working with, they're not based in Melbourne or Australia. They're on the other side of the world. And it's just, it was a very surreal experience to be like, oh, this person's actually really physically quite close to me compared to everybody else. So it was really interesting. But also, it was a really great example of how you can do a digital show and do it well. And that's because of the process that Kalani initiated in terms of getting visitors to come. She would host tours of the show where you would meet with her in a little gallery chat room, and she would literally walk you through the show, talk to you about the artist, talk to you about the works, and it was just a really great experience and something that I think we'll see a lot more of in the future.
Yeah, we don't sort of get that experience with sort of like a platform such as Rarible or NFT Gateway. You're sort of just like fending for yourself. So this was, the gallery sort of experience that they brought was really awesome.
I'm really interested about the image that's on the screen here, Serwah. I think it's a really interesting kind of cyborg, feminist, really powerful kind of image. Tell me about what are your ideas in terms of creating images like this? Because I think you've sort of touched on this importance of having a really strong feminist voice in this space as well.
Yeah, well, I'm just, as a child, I never saw images of many women in galleries, or especially many Black women or anything like that. So I just always sort of strive to put people like me and people that need to be included into artwork so that, we do feel included and we do feel seen and we can have a voice. And sort of the cyborg thing is just always been really obsessed with cyberpunk artwork, and I think it's fun. I think it's really fun.
And I'm just wondering, can we go to the next image? Because I think this image is really interesting because it also is an image, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get it to move. Oh, we are. Look, with the wonders of technology. It's actually got this movement within it that I think I'll just stop talking for a minute so people can see. What's that like in terms of for you to be making things that have this kind of floating ability within it?
Oh yeah, well, it's definitely a lot harder to make that than a still image. I prefer not to make video when I can, but so I guess my full-time job is to I'm an animator / commission-based artist and or designer, however you want to call it. So this is what I'm sort of doing all day. Charlie, this was a collaboration with the musician Charlie XCX, and if there's some audio playing, that's her kind of, when she goes on stage, she plays these little audio tags, I believe. So we incorporated that in there, and we sort of went back and forwards with the visuals on this piece. But this was to support, the LGBTQIA community and raise some money for them. We ended up selling this one for about $3,000 last week or so. And yeah, I sort of just tried to give some, sex worker pride imagery and some gay pride imagery here with the arm, with the nails, and just sort of trying to include different people into the NFT space that maybe might not feel included so far.
I think for me that's a really interesting aspect about the power of having multiple voices in this platform that isn't just kind of exclusive to one country. Like, it has this global presence, and I think for you that's a really exciting space. And what I really love is the collaborative aspect that you've already talked about, like being commissioned and collaborating with other musicians is a really interesting kind of space that often doesn't happen in other art practices as well. So it feels like there's a kind of desire to create this new world and be a really active participant in it as well.
Yeah, well, they sort of call this, I guess they call this space the metaverse, which it's not really the universe. I don't really know how to explain the metaverse, but sort of the crypto community calls this place the metaverse. And somebody had actually said to me, he's creating this crypto wallet and it looks really fascinating. It's mostly based off of trying to get musicians that a good royalty. But I was talking to him on Zoom and he said, you have a really definitive metaverse. And I had never really thought about my artwork like that until he said that. I was like, that's exactly what I've been trying to do this whole time, is create this like digital, unattainable, this universe that nobody can sort of really grasp in their mind. But yeah, the NFT community, the crypto community is very community based and very, you know, it's worldwide. I know people all over the place, every corner of the earth that's involved. And I feel like it's maybe potentially a bit more prominent than the traditional art world in terms of how expansive it is and how community based it is, just because it is all like internet based stuff. There are no limitations and we're all sort of quite new in this. So there's a lot of community spirit and a lot of willingness to help and to share knowledge.
And it sounds like there's a very kind of equal platform as well. So you're all playing in this new platform as kind of equal players, which I think the art world doesn't normally have that kind of sense of democracy, if you like, sometimes, especially when you're beginning out in an art practice. As you've been talking about this process, there's a little voice in my head going, what happens with the contracts? What happens with the contractual obligations in terms of like collaborative artwork and selling collaborative artwork as well? How does that all work? So Alana, I'm going to ask you some of those questions. Like, what happens? Is there a different type of relationship between a gallerist, you know, somewhere like Transfer Gallery that might be running that gallery in that virtual space as like a traditional gallerist who has like a building and a, you know, a white wall cubed kind of adventure?
Really good question, Melinda. So unfortunately, I have to burst everyone's bubble a little bit. I think what artists are doing in this space is amazing, but there's a lot of back-end work that still needs to be done when it comes to looking at the legal structures and arrangements that are taking place behind the scenes. And this goes for, you know, even looking at the mainstream NFT platforms and, you know, their website terms of service. I did a project with the Serpentine where we did a really in-depth analysis of all the mainstream NFT platforms about 2 months ago. So it's kind of changed because there's like new ones popping up every week. But the mainstream NFT platform, looking at their website terms of service, looking at the different rights and obligations creators have when they use those platforms. And unfortunately, even 2 months ago, there was not much consistency between them. There's not much standards behind the scenes in terms of legal rights and obligations. And it's something that will happen over time, but we're still in the very early days of that. So, you know, looking at and website terms of service is essentially the contract between the NFT platform and the person using the platform to mint it. It is that contract. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And, you know, I think a lot of the mainstream NFT platforms, you know, they've done a lot of work in that space over the last couple of months, and they'll continue to do that. When it comes to collaborative practice, though, and this is where my research with the Serpentine led, I wrote a paper specifically looking at how does the NFT platform system support or not support collaborative practice? Because as part of my work with the Serpentine, it is looking specifically at art and tech and art and science collaborations, which I think is very much the future of what will be at the heart of the art ecosystem. And most of these NFT platforms, they expect the minter, the person doing the minting, to be not just the sole copyright owner, but the sole creator. And you have to guarantee that you are the sole creator, the sole owner when you're minting a work. And, you know, the fact of the matter is there's actually not much work that's done out there that's created by one person. And that's not even in the NFT space. That is in art generally. And that is the nature of art practice generally. So I don't think a lot of these NFT platforms were created understanding actually the breadth of what contemporary art practice can look like. There are newer platforms now that are coming more from the, I guess, traditional art world, where they're starting to take into consideration those sorts of aspects. So they're building that into their back end, but it is a work in progress. I mean, the other thing I also wanted to mention is, you know, this term, the smart contract, is bandied about like, oh, don't worry, we've got our legal sorted, we've got our smart contract. But a smart contract, and I'm going to borrow from an art lawyer colleague in the US. She came up with this concept that the smart contract is actually not really that smart, unfortunately. At least it's not that smart yet. And you still need lawyers, fortunately for me. But, you know, it doesn't replace lawyers, so to speak. And it doesn't mean that if there's a smart contract in place that all your legal issues are sorted out. It's really just a self-executing computer code, but it doesn't spell out. A smart contract doesn't spell, or at least, like, you know, the standard ERC 721 contract, a smart contract that a lot of the, you know, OpenSea and Nifty Gateway and Foundation and SuperAir, what they all use, this type of a smart contract, it doesn't say what specific rights the purchaser has to whatever they're purchasing. It doesn't say, you know, you can print out a copy or you can use it as a screensaver. You can print out a poster version and put it up on your wall. It doesn't go into those sort of specifics like a legally enforceable contract could. So it's, you know, so it's a really messy space, unfortunately, at the moment. And it's just going to take time to sort it out. So, you know, my suggestion would be is just to enter this space with caution and just try to be aware of what your rights are before you do the minting. It's always much harder to
unravel it, to go back and unravel.
Yeah, it's better that you go into it with your eyes wide open and you actually understand at least, you know, what the risks are involved. Yeah.
And I think this takes us to a really interesting point, because now we've got, like, on screen there's an image of Serwah's work where she was participated in Natively Digital, so an online auction that Sotheby's has run. So how were you approached to be in this particular auction, Serwah, and what was it like? Did you reach a new audience? You know, clearly your work sold for a great price in US dollars. What was it like?
Yeah, it was definitely totally unexpected to be involved with Sotheby's, just in general, let alone the first NFT exhibition. They sort of just reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be a part of the first show. And of course I said yes. This was pretty early on into me minting. I think I'd only even just minted one on the new foundation platform before they had asked me. But yeah, this piece was created specifically for the show. I just wanted to create something that felt like a Genesis piece. People kind of use this term Genesis piece as, like, you know, your first NFT is your Genesis piece. So I just wanted to create something that felt a bit like how I would envision crypto art to look, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think this was one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen in NFTs so far. Just if you look at everybody that was involved in that show and like what they created, everything sort of seemed really fresh and new and special. Like Rob Ellis, who had co-curated the show. Shout out to Sotheby's for doing that, because I think that made it really a winner of a show, because he seems like he's really smart and he's really switched on and a great artist. So it was very easy to work with them. But yeah, everybody was creating fascinating works. I know Pac, who's pretty big in the NFT space, sort of created this NFT that would change over time or like degrade. So it's not sort of like a regular NFT or a regular artwork where it would just stay in your wallet or it would just stay on your wall. It would change based on the time. Robert Alice had created the first NFT, which was an artificial intelligence that was talking to people, and you could conversate with this NFT, and it had a face, and it was crazy. And there was another piece, I've forgotten the artist, unfortunately, but they created an NFT that would destroy itself once the temperature of the earth had gotten 5 degrees hotter or something. So people can really be so creative with this technology in a way you can be with other technologies or other forms of art. But I thought that was amazing to see such a diverse range of art forms on the Sotheby's site. And yeah, it was very successful. So happy that I was involved and so grateful.
And I think it's really interesting that a large auction house like this is suddenly engaging with a world that they wouldn't normally have a relationship with as well, sometimes as well, in terms of some of the artists that they wouldn't see in terms of their normal kind of auction space. So I think it's a really fascinating place to be talking about. I'm really interested in this kind of space and where you think it's going. So Serwah, where do you think, like, if we look at like NFTs in 5 years' time, what do you imagine that world looking like?
I think it'll become like anything else where there's sections and little, not cults, but like, you know, little groups, little divisions of things where people are doing their own stuff. But I do agree with the sort of sentiment that NFTs need some sort of curatorial aspect to it, or we do need a bit of that sort of advice or some of those older traditional ways and sort of blend them in. Weirdly, I think that, but yeah, I think that it's just about everybody else sort of embracing this technology and us sort of embracing everybody else, if that makes sense. Yeah, NFTs will be like in your music, in your businesses. You know, there's these things called DAOs, which is a decentralized automated organization, I believe that's what it stands for. I'm really bad with acronyms. Anybody correct me if I'm wrong.
And I think it's a really interesting thing, because I think in the gallery world, we've really moved into some of this digital playing space that COVID pushed us into. And now there's a lot of us going, well, actually, there's something really interesting in this world in terms of accessibility and embracement of artists and people from really diverse backgrounds that allows kind of uniform access as well. So I think it's really interesting that artists are in that space, as well as galleries now also talking in that space. I know we've got a couple of questions. So Linda, I'm wondering if you want to bring up the questions from the audience, because I think that might ask a few. I don't know the answer to this question, and I've been listening very intently.
Is this question, I'm wondering if someone could grab a digital copy of your work and then mint it without authority. They could, and that would be quite unfortunate. I've seen an incident of those CryptoPunks that we saw earlier. Somebody by the name of Brighter Rips, who's sort of not a performance artist, but what's the word for it? Sort of spins things into something else, takes work and spins things into something else.
Yep.
He basically minted a CryptoPunk that he said he'd made, but it was like an exact duplicate of one that already exists on Foundation originally, and it got taken down with a DMCA filing, and by Lava Labs, who owns CryptoPunks, who created CryptoPunks. And then he went and minted this thing on like 8 different platforms everywhere else and managed to be successful with it. People were buying it. So, yeah, definitely people can take your work, or people can twist your work into something else and mint it, which is unfortunate, but I think that can definitely happen with anything else in the world. I guess you just sort of got to be aware of what you're doing and realize that this could happen to you if you sort of come into this space. It could happen to you even if you're not in this space. Somebody could have already minted your artwork and you could be completely oblivious to it. But yeah.
And I guess, Alana, are there any kind of things that you can do to kind of protect some of that? If someone minting your work, like if you've already minted it, for example, could someone re-mint it by changing it slightly?
Well, I guess it's like what Serwah was hinting at. It's like you could even think about it like a painting on a wall. It's like asking the question, could someone come along and do the same painting but do it slightly differently? You actually bring up the same kind of issues, the same kind of copyright issues. And that's where the DMCA aspect comes from. So that's in the US, their copyright laws, they have a very stringent takedown process when it comes to copyright infringement online, and NFT platforms that are registered in the US, they will have a very stringent takedown process for that. So that's where the DMCA reference comes from. But it does just become a question of, is this a form of copyright infringement because it's a copy of a work. Original work. And a digital file, the visuals are, in general, they can be protected by copyright, just like a physical painting on a wall. So I think the more we get comfortable with the idea that yes, this is kind of new, but it's also not that new, and we've already been grappling with these issues. But unfortunately, in a way, I guess we need to get better at it, because what is different here is the ease with which you can copy, right? Like how easy it is to copy a digital file. And part of the marketing spin around NFTs has been that, this is a one-of-a-kind authentic, it's the only one out there. And, maybe in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time, the technology will be advanced so much that we will have some kind of technological way of protecting that. But at this stage, all we can rely on is the more kind of traditional measures that you have as a copyright holder when it comes to protecting your rights. So you could potentially have a legal right to sue that person, or to take steps to get them to potentially even destroy the minted work. I mean, that's where the NFT platforms also play an important role. And something that I do think is really important is that I do think they have a lot of responsibility in this space for educating users about how their rights are potentially used when they're using the platform as well. So I think that's something that could be improved in the future as well, that kind of user experience, the back-end user experience side of things as well. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that on the screen is a question from Stephen. There are no real contracts that protect the kind of rights of the creators of the work and the purchasers. I guess it's really interesting, like if there's no more sort of, publicly certified provenance records, how do we manage this kind of space? And I think what Stephen's talking about is that very kind of, very traditional notion of, selling an artwork through an auction house, where you've bought the painting. I bought the painting 20 years ago. I've got the original receipt of that painting. The gallery is still practicing. They can tell me that, and there's all that kind of elements of proving where it's been sold and traded. That's much. I think it's just that we're using that same kind of process. It's just in a technological platform. Is that right? Does that feel like that's how it should be?
Yeah, it's a public register of who owns what. You don't really know who owns what. It's because it's just a string of numbers and letters, right? So could be anybody. So it's kind of very public, but very anonymous at the same time. But I think at the end of the day, yes, you still need to think about having contracts between you and the purchaser if you want to have that purchaser commit to certain things as part of the transaction. For example, not turning the NFT digital file into merchandise, things like that. But it's just not spelled out at the moment in smart contracts.
Which I think is, yeah.
Oh, sorry,
I think that's one of the next questions. Can you mint one work on a different platform, and can I sell prints of a work I sold on an NFT?
Well, you're not supposed to mint works on different platforms, and most of the terms of use will say that you are only allowed to mint on the one platform, and you guarantee as part of minting on this platform that you're not going to mint it anywhere else. And because, as I mentioned, that's a contract between the creator, the minter, and the platform. If you breach that, you're breaching the contract with the NFT platform. And so they could say, well, you've breached our contract. We have a right to remove or take down that work. Yeah. It's never going to be deleted from the blockchain. And that's part of the benefits of the blockchain, that you can never delete anything on it, but you can write on top of it. You can override it to say that previous transaction is, no longer in place. I just wanted to also mention the resale royalty aspect, which is something that is also kind of promoted as part of the benefits of NFTs. And I think being in Australia, actually, it's nice to be able to talk about it here because it's a very different conversation to the conversation we see coming out of the US. So in the US, there is no legally guaranteed right to a resale royalty for artists when they resell their work. And that comes back to this idea of free market principles. In Australia and in many other jurisdictions, I think about 70 countries around the world, there is legislation that guarantees resale royalties for artists. So it might actually be the case that if you sell an NFT legal, at least from the perspective of the law in the country that you're working and living in, you might actually legally have the right to a resale royalty. And that process would take place, external to, your smart contracts and NFT process. Resale royalties are, at the moment, and I'm just talking to mainstream NFT platforms, they're something that's guaranteed by the platform. So if you buy an NFT on one platform and you sell it on another platform, there'll be no way to stop that resale. There'll be no way to, that resale royalty is not actually automatic. It's not usually actually built into the smart contract level. It's part of the level with the NFT platform. So it has its limitations. Again, it's something that has potential in the future. Hopefully they'll get better at the technical side of it. But I would just be wary of that, because a lot of the time we hear that US sentiment, oh, well, now I get resale royalties and I never was entitled to. And it's like, well, actually you are. So, that's another aspect to think about as well.
And I think you just asked an interesting question about the money for work of NFTs in this space seems to be sort of much larger than some of the, traditional contemporary art sales. And is this the end of physical art? What do you say, lovely people? Are people, going to stop buying a painting?
I don't think so. I think it's just very new and exciting. I think that just things that are digital in general are sort of very interesting right now, of course, with the pandemic and stuff. It's really spatially, we're very disassociated right now, as you can imagine. So I think that we're very new in the game. This, the money might change. It might not be about the money for a lot of people. This might just be something fun to sort of get into. But I think that, we shouldn't give up on physical art. And there are a lot of NFT projects that do come with a certain aspect of physical art along with it. People sending up a high quality print with an NFT that's been sold, or some sort of physical. I think there was somebody else that actually at Sotheby's, Don Diablo, who created this crazy contraption, like this robotic box or something, this glass thing, and he's sent it off with the NFT, as far as I'm aware. So I think that it can come hand in hand, just like with everything, that really big Leonardo da Vinci piece that sold for like 400 million. Like people, I don't know of any NFTs just yet that have sold for that much. So it's always going to be coexisting, I think.
I'm really interested. We've had some really interesting questions. So what's next? What projects are you working on now for the next little while?
Me? Well, I've had quite a bit of gallery sort of interest, NFT gallery sort of interest. I'm trying to really limit myself to doing just like minting on platforms and stuff for now, because I think it's really interesting to explore further about, how I can sort of cross worlds here. So yeah, quite a few collaborations, I guess you could call it. But yeah, as I said, I still work quite full time on commission work and just making fun art that doesn't have to be minted. So I'm still going to do that. I've been working on a tarot card deck for like a billion years, and hopefully I can finish that this year so I can do something with that.
Thank you. And Alana, do you have any like crypto projects that are coming up on the horizon? Are you working on anything behind the scenes?
So I have been advising a few of new NFT platforms over the last few months, and it's really fascinating work. And also my ongoing work with the Serpentine. Just a shout out for the 26th of July. We're going to be launching the first Legal Lab report, and that's the culmination of 2.5 years of research into legal issues in art and tech and science collaboration. So we went out to artists, technologists, scientists, tech companies, sponsors, galleries, you name it, to really try to understand the types of legal issues that they're facing. I think a lot of this stuff doesn't get talked about much, and so we really want to have that out there and make it public so that everyone can benefit from this research as well. So on the 26th, the report will be released, and we're also going to be doing a live event on Twitch. So I think if you Google Serpentine and Legal Lab, you should be able to find it there.
I look forward to coming along and exploring that world. I want to thank you so much for both of you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Alana Kushner from Guesswork Agency and Serwah Attafuah from living in Sydney in lockdown and coming along. It's been really fabulous to have a really interesting conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and that's Serwah's website on the screen below. We wish you all the best for your virtual and real world adventures coming up. Thank you for joining us live tonight. And if you haven't visited Linden New Art, we have some really great exhibitions on at the moment by Natasha Bieniak, Ruth Hofflick, Vipu Srivalasa, and in our Linden project space, Anna Revez. You can go to our website, which is just on the screen below me, lindenarts.org, and join our mailing list and keep up to date. Thanks again for coming along this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.